I think you all know where your mute button is now because Gus so kindly took us through that when we first came in the room. I also wanted to mention it's the video on and off button. And during this meeting, I've seen it established in other city meetings that if you could stay on video as much as you can, that'd be great. You can turn off the video if you have to, but that way everyone knows that you're here and we can interact with you. When you have a comment or a question, use the chat window and indicate question or comment, and then I'll call on you. I have a nice queue lined up there, and Stephen can help me with that. If you put a question in the chat, you're going to be saying it out loud anyway because we have people on the phone who come in and just listen to the meeting and they can't see your chat. So it's quicker just to say comment or question. And then when you do speak, another reason for with the audio only is to say who you are before you start. You can say, hi, this is Nina Milligan. I have a question about. So that would be great. I think those are all the kind of technical details. Sound good to you, Stephen? I think I'll call the meeting to order. I'm going to open up that chat window before I do it. Okay, it is 6:04, and I am calling to order the Thursday, August 6th meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board for the City of Issaquah. Stephen, can you remind me, do I need to call the roll?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm just going to go through with my screen here. Nina Milligan here, yes. Cynthia Krass, go come off mute, say here. Emma Gruby.
Here.
Kobe Sunday. You came off mute. If I could see you, then I would also know you were here.
I can see him.
Oh, okay, good. And somebody was here. Okay, let's go to Maddie. Maddie, yay.
Here.
Marisol Visser.
Here.
Suyata
Here.
Suyata Goyle.
Here.
Okay, I think that's it. Stephen, could you comment on whether this is a quorum or if it needs to be?
You have a quorum.
Back to my notes. And I'm nothing without my notes tonight, so you guys all bear with me. Our first order of business is the approval of minutes from our June 18 meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes? And are there any comments? If there are, go ahead and put it in the chat. I'll get to you. And I'm not seeing any, so I will, Stephen, again, it's a roll call vote for the minutes too.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to call in it's yay or nay or abstain for approving the minutes of our meeting dated June 18th. Cynthia?
Sorry. I'm sorry. I was looking for the agenda. I wish we had the papers. It's I'm not doing anything else, but I do. What was the question?
Just
I was looking for
the minutes from our last meeting in June.
Aye.
Emma?
Aye.
Kobe? Well, I'm not. Oh, there you are. Say nod yes when you say aye. It's, for me, his connection's not very good. Did you get an aye from him, Stephen?
Go ahead and talk now, Kobe.
Not hearing him.
I see a little symbol saying his internet connection is challenged. He's going to come back. I'm going to go on and then come back to him.
Okay.
Okay.
Maddie?
Can...
Yeah, Maddie?
Aye.
Marisol?
Aye.
And Tom's next on my list. Tom, I'm going to ask you first that you're here. You can say, hi, Tom, I'm here. And then would you please vote on the minutes from June 18? Do you approve them?
I am here.
And do you approve the minutes of June 18?
Aye.
Thank you. Suyata?
Aye.
And did Kobe come? Yeah, Kobe, approving the minutes of June 18? Gosh.
I can
Kobe,
see
if you can
his
hear us, try
microphone.
unmuting yourself.
He says aye in the chat. Can we accept that while he works on his microphone?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I'm seeing it's set to mute, Kobe.
Is it working now?
Ah, there you are.
Aye.
Yay, Kobe. Super duper. Okay, so the minutes are approved unanimously. The next item on our agenda is public comments. And before we do that, I wanted to just spend a moment as we start this meeting to provide some context for myself and anybody else who this might be helpful to. And then we'll go right into public comment. This will just take me a minute. But I wanted to introduce kind of where I was coming from, try to summarize where the tab is coming from. We haven't had a lot of meetings this year, and I thought it might help for the record. And I also want to give our Vice Chair, Cynthia Crass, an opportunity. And Cynthia, do you want to say some words first before I say any of my opening comments?
You know, I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but at some point this evening, I want to make comments about the study session. And
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I think we will have time for that when when Stephen's talking about that, the council meeting. That'd be perfect there.
that's primarily what I wanted to share this evening.
Okay, good. Stephen's made note of that, and so when he does his informational presentation on that, he can call on you. Okay. Well, I just wanted to put some context around it. This meeting that we're having tonight, like I said, and our minutes imply, we had a meeting on June 18th, and then on July 8th, the draft of the Mobility Master Plan was emailed, distributed to the TAB, the Transportation Advisory Board. Now, even though we've discussed and collaborated on many of the pieces in the Mobility Master Plan, this is the first time that we've all been able to discuss it as a body and to address the draft plan. Prior to the June 18 meeting, we met in January 27th, and in 2019, we met 12 times. Tonight's meeting has 4 agenda items. The first one is informational, and Stephen will lead that. And it's an update on the plan schedule. The next 2 items on the agenda are the City Council study session, which Cynthia was just referring to, and then a discussion on our behalf on the draft plan. And Stephen's going to walk us through a list of revised changes. Now, the agenda has changed just a little bit in that item C, which was item C, moved to the end, and that is the letter that the Transportation Advisory Board will compose this evening as a body to accompany this plan on its next step. So before I get any further, though, I wanted to share kind of the way that I'm approaching this evening's deliberations. I'm just the chair, and you all are the experts. And I'm reminding myself that we're an advisory board. We're not a decision-making body. And it's, as it's stated in our governing documents, it's our job to provide expertise and advice. I found this draft plan somewhat daunting, but when you put it in that context, I know I can really be helpful in this process, and I hope you all feel the same. The challenge tonight, though, is that it is a milestone for us to take this plan and to move it along in the process with some sense of closure from the TAB. And what is that package that we're sending along? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I'll try to develop a message to the city administration and the city council with all of your help that represents us as a group. That's that letter. We'll work on that together later. During the meeting, I'm going to try to listen very carefully for things that exemplify the consensus that we may have about the plan. And feel free to be very helpful with me on that. Everybody will have individual opinions, but then there's a consensus that we're looking for. And Stephen, I'm sure, is going to be very helpful in sussing that out with me. So anyway, that's kind of what we have before us. Hope everybody feels comfortable and looking forward to this project with you. And unless there's any issues, I'd like to go to public comment. So Stephen, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can come off mute, and because I think you're the host, and introduce any public comment. All speakers in public comment have 3-minute limit, and any other rules Stephen can convey for you.
Yes, we have one person on the line for public comment. Connie Marsh, you are unmuted.
Hi, I'm Connie Marsh, and I'm assuming that you can all hear me fine.
Yes.
Now, most of you may not know me, but I follow the city a lot, and there's nothing that makes me happier than reading a new report. However, I see Nina talking, but I can't hear anything. So anyway, in this situation, I read this report and I was unable to understand where it was taking anyone and how it was supposed to be used and how it was going to be successful, because me in my plan-loving brain couldn't understand it. So while I think it is a good initial draft, I think it needs a lot of work to become shorter, more pointed, and actually follow a theme through to a conclusion that would be helpful in transportation in Issaquah. I did send you 2 things. I sent you my point of view on how I thought it could be reorganized to become more sensible and successful. And then I also sent you a matrix that I had to create of all the policies that would potentially be changed, because I simply can't understand what this plan is going to be doing if it gets adopted. There are some glaring errors, things that are missing, like congestion. There's no particular conversation about congestion, and as I just spent the last 3 hours deep in congestion, and the town knows congestion, I think this document needs to come straight forward and talk about how the plan is going to help or not help with congestion, because many people just want to get in their cars. Then the last point is we have the whole COVID thing going on, and I see no urgency in pushing this document forward, especially in this draft form. So my suggestion would be to remand this back to the tab to give it extensive editorial rights. So then you could have a bunch of different people all trying to figure out how to make it understandable and usable. So it is now being pushed forward to Planning Policy Commission for review, but a 200 and some page document for review is just a tough row to hoe there. So please decide to just save it for yourselves, take a little while longer because there's no hurry, and make it a better document before you push it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie. I appreciate that. Are there any other public comments? People waiting to speak, Stephen?
I don't see any. I don't see any emails.
Okay, then I am closing public comment at 6:16. And then I will turn over the meeting again to Stephen for agenda item number 1, mobility master plan schedule update. Thank you, Stephen.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pull up a slide really quick to help go through this for our updated schedule. So it all starts with tonight's meeting to review the draft plan as a board, as Nina was speaking to. Following tonight's meeting, this will go to the Planning Policy Commission for review to get their feedback on the plan and the policies that are being proposed. And then on September 8th, it'll go to City Council to do 2 things. First is to approve a resolution that the master plan contains what the city is looking for in terms of vision and policies, and it should continue as part of the comp plan update process. And the second thing the city council will be doing is adding the master plan to the comp plan docket. And then following that meeting, it'll get reviewed as part of the comp plan update process for the public hearing in October. And then it will go to city council study session for review on November. And then it'll go to full adoption as part of the comp plan update in December. Are there any questions on any of that?
Even I see that Cynthia has a question. Cynthia, come off mute and ask your question.
Hi, I just want to make sure I understand, because I know there was a little bit of back and forth, but I want to make sure I understand, and maybe I'm not the only one that needs clarification. So are we saying that the plan, MMP, won't be finalized until the comprehensive plan update is finalized? Or are we sending an adopted plan to be then inserted into the comp plan docket? Is it, so I wasn't really clear on whether it could be.
It won't be finalized until the comp plan is adopted in December, just because as part of the comp plan review process, it's open for review and edits as part of the review from the Planning Policy Commission, but also the public hearing process.
Thanks.
So this is Tom. So that means they all happen at the same time. They can still comment up into that point, where it's then moved forward to an adopted.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions on?
Yeah, Stephen, I don't see any other questions. And as we move along in the meeting, just a little reminder, if you have a question or comment, open up the chat window down in the bottom of your screen. There's a little voice bubble, and that'll open up a chat window on the side of your screen. And then you can write in the bottom, chatting to everyone, that you have a question or a comment. And then I'll call on you, or Stephen will. And then when we do call on you, remember to say, hi, this is Cynthia Grass. Hi, this is Emma Gruby, when you go to speak, because some people are listening to this meeting and not seeing it. So just little reminders. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Stephen for agenda item B, if you're ready for that, the July 28th City Council Study Session Report.
Yes. So for this video, my video's not on. For this item, I'm just going to give a quick update just from my perspective for the City Council study session, and then I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia and Nida to kind of give their thoughts on what they thought of this study session. Overall, I thought the study session went really well with the City Council last week. They are taking a lot of what the tab has put forward with the master plan, and they like a lot of the ideas and the changes and policies moving forward with the master plan. They gave a lot of feedback for edits that we're still working towards, and a lot of that we're still working through, which is why weren't able to provide an updated draft on the master plan for today's meeting. But we at least wanted to provide the comments or the locations that we were making changes as you were kind of going through the document. So now, overall, we'll be making a lot of structure and organizational changes so that it's a little bit easier to understand. One of the big comments, as you heard from a public comment, is we need to make it a little bit shorter so that people can digest it a little bit easier. So we're working on that. I'll turn it over to Nina and Cynthia now to kind of give their perspective.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. Yeah, Cynthia, this is a good place for you to provide the comments you were mentioning earlier, and you can go first if you like.
Hi, this is Cynthia Krass, and I was in the council study session supporting Nina as the vice chair of this board. I thought it was a really good chance to step back. We've had so much disruption that we've kind of forgotten. Obviously, the consultants and Stephen have done all the heavy lifting, but we really did a lot of work, and it was kind of a good chance to reflect. And it was through their comments that I had that chance to reflect. And I wanted to share some of them with you. For me, one of the things I asked Stephen when he talked about me serving on this board is I said, I'd be interested in serving in an advisory board if the body being advised is interested in advice. I've seen it where it doesn't really work that way, and I wasn't interested in that. And I really felt like they were interested in the work that we did. They took it very, very seriously. And, I just kind of left with a warm fuzzy. And I just wanted to share, I took some notes. Let's see, council member. And Nina has been on council, if I'm not mistaken, and understands and knows a lot of those folks better than I. I'm really a relative newcomer. I don't know anybody. But Councilmember Dee Michelle talked about the guiding principles specifically. She called those out as being really good. Councilmember Walsh called out the 19 goals. I don't remember how many goals, but I wrote in my notes 19 goals. Councilmember Hunt worked on some visioning documents on the planning board, and she knows how hard that work is and how much, and she really, really appreciated the work that we had done. Councilmember Walsh mentioned the scoring criteria specifically and how useful that was. And Councilmember Dee Michelle said about the project evaluation criteria, it's what's been missing. And I really felt like this was a body of work that sometimes you work on these plans and they just seem like a bunch of stuff that sits on a shelf and does it really have meaning? But this work really hasn't been done before. So kudos to Stephen and to the consultants that have done, like I said, the heavy lifting, but we really did a lot of work and we really slogged through those guiding principles, the scoring criteria. I was sort of relying on recent memory, kind of remembering that a lot of stuff happened that I didn't really, get a chance to discuss. We didn't get a chance to discuss as a group. But then this meeting helped me remember how much we did do, and we slogged through a lot of content, and it became the basis by which a lot of the work, to draft the document was. But anyway, I really was encouraged by their response. The other thing is, frankly, again, I don't know the council at all. I was pretty darn impressed with their level of detail that they had. I mean, they spent time with this. This is they got I don't know how many of these documents they have to read and how many of these study sessions they have to go to. This was a 90-minute session, and there was another 90-minute session, I think, about jails right after us. And every time I meet with council members of any kind, I'm always kind of humbled by the breadth that they have to cover. And when they go to this level of detail on just one of the many things they're responsible for, frankly, I'm fairly impressed. So anyway, I thought it was good. There were lots and lots of little details that needed some addressing, but I wanted to share that with you guys because I thought it was uplifting. Thanks.
Excellent. That's a great summary, Cynthia, and I will supplement it, by first agreeing with everything you said, and then not only was I impressed with their work, they didn't surprise me, like you said, I already know them, but I was reassured that at their level of evaluation and analysis, which was quite deep, that they weren't really worried about this. This was on the right track. It had things that needed to be fixed, and they were sure to say it, and they knew that it would have more touches after this, but they felt it was very much on the right track. And so that was very reassuring because we hadn't seen it yet. We didn't know, how does this all come together? And to have these policy wonks say that, I thought was very reassuring. A couple of things that I might point out of specifics that jumped out at me that Stephen is working on putting in, but I'm just wanted to share them, was that City Administrator Wally Bobkowitz had mentioned that where we had a 5-year, come back to it in 5 years because of all the dynamics in today's world and the draftness of this, that coming back sooner for maybe an annual review while we shake out some of the big changes in the world, maybe most done due to COVID. Also, Stacy Goodman had pointed out something that Cynthia had noticed also is about the statement about the station location, which had not been determined and shouldn't be in the document. So that was really a good call out. Councilmember Dee Michelle had pointed out that she thought there could be more about the environment in there. Councilmember Hunt and he wasn't the only one who was saying something about I don't see enough about implementation. Wanted a little bit more about that. And then Councilmember Martz was one of many who had said we need more about funding in here. That's the big issue. We don't have enough in here about funding. And the last one that I was going to mention was that several council members pointed out that for transit, that we need to look more to ourselves for providing the kind of local transit that our people need to get around Issaquah Highlands, and how can this plan help support local transit, not just regional transit or the things that are provided by Metro and Sound Transit. So those were kind of my, I was really glad to hear those. I thought they were helpful comments. We have a question from Sujata. Are you ready to go, Sujata? Unmute yourself.
Hi, Sujata Goyal. I just had a question. My question was specifically just actually about what Stephen was saying, was that there were, so in the plan that was sent to us with those annotated comments or sticky notes, so just to clarify, those sticky note comments are from the council session? So is that the input that the council provided?
Yes, it includes the council input for all the areas that they were looking to look for edits, but also includes feedback from Nina and Cynthia as well as staff. So it's kind of a collection of all the comments that we're working on right now.
Okay, thank you.
I do not see any more questions or comments about this part of the agenda, which is the council study session. Given another second, anybody else have a comment or a question about the city council study session? Not seeing it. If you see one pop in, Stephen, in the next second, go ahead and grab it. But the next item on the agenda is the review of the Mobility Master Draft Plan and the list of revised changes. This is a discussion item, and I'm going to turn it back over to Stephen.
Great, thank you. So originally I didn't have slides for this, but I realized today that I probably should have something on the screen for us to walk through to help us. So I just put the table of contents on just a quick slide for us, just pulled it from the plan, just to make it easier for our discussion tonight. So I'm going to share that really quick. And I think what I'm going to do tonight is I will walk through each of the items, explain briefly what the ongoing changes are for those sections, and then open the floor for feedback from each of you to see if there's any specific feedback on these sections as we walk through. Does that work for you, Nina?
It can be, but I don't know if I have my comments and notes arranged in so I know exactly where they go. So we can go through this way and then maybe do a catch-all at the end if we.
Yeah, I have a question. On the agenda, were we going to look at the letter of support before we got into the master plan?
Yes. So Nina had asked that we actually move that to the end of our meeting, just so we can dedicate a little bit more time for that, because that one's going to require a little more discussion. Thanks for bringing it up, Tom. Forgot to mention that at the beginning. So for our draft plan, for the first section of the executive summary, we got a lot of feedback on the executive from the city council. One of the main things is that we're going to be reorganizing this to better explain what's in the plan itself. It does some of that, but we need to go in a little more detail of specifically the policies and the actions moving forward, what we're trying to achieve out of the master plan, but also insert a robust problem statement so that people can understand what exactly we're trying to solve with the master plan itself. The other part is stronger language explaining exactly how this plan relates to all the other planning efforts, but also planning documents that pre-exist in the city too. That's one thing that City Council was clear on, that they need a little more information to understand that. So now I'll open the floor, or did you want me to wait to the end, Nina? Sorry.
I think Sujata has a question at this time. Okay. And I think that if you pause at each section as you have them bulleted on the slide, that would be a good idea. And okay. my comment earlier meant that if you don't know where your comment fits, it's okay just to save it till later.
Save it at the end.
That'll help
Got it.
us find it. So,
Okay.
Sujata, why don't you go ahead and unmute, say your name, and ask your question.
Hi, Sujata Goyal. So I have a question actually about, so one of the things was, you know, I like the executive summary because it was really pithy, and then it does a good job of setting the framework. I like the idea of including a problem statement, but I guess, so that's why I was asking who was adding these sticky notes or where those comments came from, because, you know, one of the things is I can understand the desire to connect it more to the other planning efforts or acknowledge that this plan, you know, lives in a universe with other stuff. And that was when I was going through it, that was one of my comments. But then as I read, you know, 30 pages later, 40 pages later, I was like, oh, we referenced the plans later. And so I guess this is where there's that balance between trying to provide all the context you can up front for what you're doing with, because there are places in the plan where it starts to feel really redundant. So I almost feel like if you had that whole section where you talked about the different plans that this will tie to in the executive summary, and then you go into it in more detail later, that could potentially feel redundant. So I guess that would be my only caution. But I mean, it was funny because when I read it, I was like, oh, we need to reference these plans. And then I read them later and I was like, okay, forget it. So anyway, good luck with that. Good luck with balancing that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the executive summary? No, seeing none. Okay, I'll move on to the introduction plan development process. Most of you are already aware with the introduction being the work that the tab has worked on, the process that we went through to explain what the purpose of the master plan was. Plan development process encompassed a lot of the public process and the communication that we had with the different stakeholders to weigh in on what's important for our community today, because that's a conversation that we haven't really had in a long time for transportation, and so we wanted to make sure that that was important. And I also include Issaquah today and future growth. I mean, for the first 30 pages, it talks about the introduction, plan development process, Issaquah, future growth. I think that's where we might cut down a little bit more and stick some of that in the appendices so we can shorten this plan quite a bit. In general, we're going to be adding more to the climate change section that we heard loud and clear from the community, but also the city council, that more needs to be inserted in that to define what our goals need to be, but also how this relates to our greenhouse gas emissions goals and the reduction of emissions. You know, when we say a certain action, what does that mean in terms of reduction of emissions, and just better defining how this relates to the climate change and how the changes we want to make are actually helping us in the long run. The other big adds in general is adding more information about our current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, as Nina was speaking to, a lot is going to be changing and a lot has changed. And so we want to be able to identify those and address those, even though, you know, our overall vision and what we're trying to achieve is going to be the same. We are wanting to make sure that we still recognize that change is going to be happening, because some of these sections are going to be updated right away next year once we have a better outlook on our financial stance for the city, but also as a region. And then we have a better idea of what our transit partners might be doing in the region. So we want to make sure that this plan stays updated as we're working through on implementation. And the last thing I would add that City Council felt that was important was adding additional language on how important maintenance is in the consideration when prioritizing projects, but also in the development of project ideas. Because, you know, we can propose to build a whole bunch of infrastructure, but if we can't afford to maintain it over time, it's not necessarily the best investment anymore. And that's something that the region has made sure that's important, because they include that as part of the project selection for regional grants now. So we want to make sure that's considered for as part of this process too. I'll
take a pause
stop
there.
here. I'll pause here and open the floor. Kobe, I see you have a question.
Yes. Kobe Sunday. So it seems like we've heard a lot of criticism about the length of the document, and I know it's super difficult to manage making sure that we have all the right content in there as well as keeping it short and concise. But it sounds like we're adding a lot more than we're taking away. So I'm wondering if it is still possible to cut down the document at all or take away unnecessary parts, or if that's not super feasible.
Cutting out stuff, probably not, but moving stuff more into the appendices and just referencing those from the appendices just to make the general document, or the general plan itself, a little more digestible is definitely achievable, even with adding some of these other items. Thank you, Kobe.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Very good. I want to check in with Tom. He says his question's answered, but is it really? And do you have anything, Tom?
No, I think Steve was addressing some of the questions I had related to the COVID-19, everything from funding to availability and the uncertainty of what will happen in the next year. So that was good. No more further questions on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. And I don't have anybody else in the queue. Cynthia, you want to shake your head whether you have anything to say here? Doing okay? I want to affirm and support what you're saying about the appendices being maybe a useful place. This section, Introduction, Plan Development, and Issaquah Today and Future Growth, golly, it is a slog. And then I felt, when I went out to the appendices, I thought, no, wait a minute. Wasn't I talking about this? It was hard for me to connect all those dots. It really made for a confusing navigation between the two documents. And frankly, by the time I got to the appendices, I couldn't read it anymore. But if they're considered as a reference material, this may be one to go. And so I really appreciate that direction. And then, Stephen, did you just talk about all three of those things? Introduction, Plan Development, and Issaquah Today and Future?
Yes, yeah, okay. Just because that was the main meat before the policies and implementation, which were the other big topics.
Okay, so then when you go to policies, tell us what page we're starting on and then give us a spiel. I don't see any other questions at this time.
For policies, I believe I'm starting from page 30 from the draft document. And for that, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of feedback from the city council on changing much of that. It was more of adding to the language and make sure things were clear. It was more clarifying language than actually changing any of the policy direction. Nina or Cynthia, would you confirm that that's what we heard?
Yeah, this is Cynthia Kress. I would say that definitely, in fact, I didn't talk about that in my summary comments. That was another thing I was really surprised about, is that their comments were pretty detailed and a lot of them were clarifying and they wanted stuff added, but they didn't fundamentally disagree with the main thrust and the direction, which I think Nina alluded to as well. But yes.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I have a couple comments, and I have, well, first I have some overarching questions, but if I'm watching the chat window, if anybody has comments or questions, please say so. Maybe Stephen, one of the things on my mind might help to get juices flowing here is that we had three main policies that we discussed this year. Let's make sure I say them right. Complete streets, crossing guidelines, and traffic calming. And I kind of found them in the document, but can you better summarize how they are in the document?
Sure. So for the way we're handling complete streets, so for those that remember from our previous discussion on these, complete streets, crossing guidelines, and traffic calming are separate policies out of the master plan itself. But we address them in being that they are actually achieving much of the vision set in the guiding principles once we update them, which is one of the first steps with implementation with the master plan. And so the idea is with the complete streets is we're looking beyond just trying to create a facility for all the different modes of travel. We're actually trying to create infrastructure that people want to use and balancing the demand for the use of our roadways. Because we're limited roadways, we want to make sure that we're using it efficiently. And when it comes to the crossing guidelines, updating that is updating multiple policies on how we make improvements to our crossing infrastructure, but also the design of that crossing infrastructure well, and making sure that that corresponds with the land use or the activity of where the crossings are going to be improved. And then when it comes to the traffic calming, we want to expand the tool set that we have, but also when we want to use it. And so that was the purpose of being able to update those policies separate from the master plan itself. And so what we want to do with the master plan is make sure that they're tied in and addressed, but because they're so detailed of how we use for implementation, they are used as separate policies. And does that answer your question?
It begins to answer my question. Okay, so in looking at these complete streets, MMP2 seems like a chapter that has its policies in it, but the other two seemed like references, as you just mentioned, references to some future implementation. Are these things, so to what degree is that policy number 2 complete for the complete streets? And then do the crossing guidelines come back to us and then become part of this document, or do they always stay outside? I keep asking you this question, I know.
They always stay outside of the master plan, just so we can use them separate from the master plan.
Okay. Any other questions coming up? I always have questions. But looking in, not seeing anybody. I'm going to go ahead and ask another question.
Sujata has a question, actually.
Oh,
I think
yay.
you sent it to me privately.
Oh, sorry. I don't know how that got switched to private. I apologize. Yes, Sujata Goyal, I have a question. So one of the things from a readability perspective that I think could make it easier is I understand the design. It would, at least for me, it would be easier from a readability perspective if we could have a table of the policies versus, and maybe that's one of the appendices. I honestly lost sight of it by the time we got to the appendices, but I think just even from a public knowing and understanding perspective, or the way you're then able to communicate forward to, developers or your land use people or your plan examiners. But if we could have it where instead of describing it in detail, you just sort of have a matrix that lists all the policies. It could potentially, and stop me if there is actually an appendix with the matrix of policies, but I feel like instead of putting that as an appendices, but maybe starting the chapter with that, or after a brief introduction could be helpful, because I was like trying to flash through it to try to read it and was having some difficulty.
Thank you for that. Yes, we are actually working on a matrix of all policies to not only just separate out all our policies that we have proposed in the master plan, but also to show the differences, or at least what's carrying over from previous, because this is going to be replacing the transportation element in the comp plan, which has policies, and that's getting replaced by this. And so we're actually going to have this matrix to compare to and show what's staying, what's going.
Oh, okay. So you're going to crosswalk those two sets.
Yes.
Okay. And then sorry for hogging all the time, but then the other question I had was, so there's this notion, so we have a set of policies around complete streets, which is, this value around multimodal. And so I think one of the things that continues to sort of, I guess, confuse me about the way we unpack the policies is we talk about the complete streets and that sort of value and vision for that, but then we break it up into the individual modes. So then we say, for walking, these are our policies. And then for biking, these are our policies. And I guess I'm just wondering how, because they clearly fit together somehow, where if our policy is complete streets, it includes all those modes. But so anyway, that gets a little confusing for me. And
Okay.
I'm not sure why. So I apologize.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. We'll make sure that the language that we're putting in as we're making the changes clears that up a little bit more.
I see a comment from Tom that I'd like to welcome you to say in the meeting so that people who are just listening can hear you. Tom, will you share that with the rest?
Yeah, I was kind of agreeing with what Sujata just said as far as having a list of the policies up front in a simple table. So when you read through them, because there's kind of a policy and some description and some other text, but if you have a summary of what they are, it kind of gives you a preview of what you're going to be looking at in that section. It kind of ties them all together in a way before you get into it.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom and Sujata. Very good. Yeah, and not this would be a total rewrite, but to Sujata's point, somebody had said to me that the table of contents could be the guiding principles wherein all these things. Right now, we have to look at the guiding principle and say, how is that applied to walking, biking, transit, blah blah. We have to kind of weave that through when so that it's a framework, but it's not a framework that's really used. It's hard to follow. It made it hard to evaluate the plan. But.
So this is Tom. I wouldn't think it's a whole rewrite, but more of this insertion of some sections that might help guide the next. So I'm not sure what I'm saying. I don't think it's a rewrite. I think it's adding a little clarification, for example, table at the beginning of the section.
Could you
Stephen,
elaborate
maybe
a little
you
bit
could-
more on that, Tom?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just relating, I think, more to like the policies. If there's a table that describes what's going to be in the next section or that ties it together, I don't think it's a rewrite of the document, a lot of reorganization. I think it's more putting a summary or a table at the beginning of a section.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
But sorry, Nana, but were you saying
Please.
that you actually felt that it should be reorganized by the policy, or I mean, by the guiding principle? So that I think that you guys were talking about two different things.
Yeah, I think I can solve this. It's just a concept idea that would not necessarily be practical, but in spirit, Tom spoke to the purpose of it, which would be how can we help people, ourselves included, see how the policies serve the guiding principles? What kind of cross-referencing could be available so that you see that this addresses these guiding principles or something? Yeah, I don't know. It's a very creative concept. I liked your idea though, Tom. I think that's something that could be worked in. I'm not seeing anybody else in the chat window. Stephen, have you gotten any comments or questions privately sent to you?
No, nothing else.
No. Do I try another one? I'll try another one if you're ready. On page under walking, where we have the 4-tier system, I wanted to understand better why. I think I know why, but I still might disagree. Why streets in 3 sections would be exempt from the lower speed limit to 20 miles per hour for local streets. And this is on page 34 of the plan, on page 66 of the packet, under the section called walking.
Let me pull that up really quick.
It's MMP3.
All right, Nina, on what page were you referring to?
Page, just a second here, I'm sorry. Page 66 of the packet, page 34 of the plan.
Okay.
You're talking about tier 4?
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't to say that they're exempt. It was to say that one of the main strategies for the residential streets outside of the commercial areas of the city is aim to make that 20 miles per hour the standard speed limit. That doesn't always apply for commercial areas, but that can. It wasn't to exempt those areas. It was just to say for the tier 4 areas, the areas outside the commercial areas, this would be one of the main strategies for having safer travel.
Okay, I think then what has happened here, it says outside the central Issaquah Growth Center, Old Town, and Issaquah Highlands neighborhoods. Just by the very phrase, Issaquah Highlands neighborhoods, it's saying that it doesn't apply to where houses are either, you know, see what I mean? And then Old Town isn't just a commercial district, it's also neighborhoods. And so the point that I'm trying to make, and you can help me with, is that I would certainly welcome looking at lowering all speeds on local streets to 20 miles per hour. Now, you could say, except for in commercial districts. I don't know why you want them to go faster there. The city of Seattle has been slowing its speed limits down on all streets, all things that are considered smaller local streets. Anyway, that's my complaint there. I wonder if anybody else has any comments or.
That is, it's our intention, but you're right. It's not written very well, so we will rewrite that to make sure it reflects exactly what you were saying right now.
Yeah, 20 miles an hour is pretty slow. It'd be hard to really enforce that, where the natural feel of someone driving on a road is going to drive kind of the natural feel of comfort of that road. And a lot of streets are designed for a speed limit to take into account the sight distance, the crossings, the lights, the timing. So if you force a 20 mile an hour, it's going to be hard to enforce. People are probably going to go 25, between 25 and 30, what they feel comfortable with what that road is designed to.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And if we weren't talking about just the local street standard, we're not talking about collector arterials or any of those other ones that people want to haul down them. You know, Issaquah Highlands has a lot of queuing streets. It has parking on both sides. It has multiple crossings everywhere and parking all along. These are streets where people should not feel safe driving fast, yet they do. And we've had community complaints about speeding. The big frustration that I've seen over and over again in Issaquah Highlands, and I'm sure it's the same in Old Town, is that people say people drive too fast, and then they go out and put those rubber things out there, and the data comes back and says they're not driving too fast, they're driving 25. Well, the impression is that 25 is too fast for these local streets where people's homes, lots of cross streets, kids playing ball, you have to queue to get by, those sorts of things. Some people feel comfortable going 25 and 30 miles an hour on those streets, and God, I don't know why. So if you can help balance all those comments, Stephen, find a way through that. Tom made some really good points, and I'm not arguing with him at all.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so maybe the thing is to have, reread that actually, traffic calming items in there.
I mean, there's, to Nina's point, there are streets that already pre-exist where they're built for that speed, but we still have the higher speed limit of 25, just as a standard residential street. But we also, to your point, Tom, there are residential streets that are a little bit wider, and people are more comfortable going 30 to 35 miles per hour down those residential streets. So to your point, a lot of those streets are going to need changes in infrastructure before we set that speed limit, and that's part of that implementation is not just to do a full blanket, okay, all residential streets are 20 miles per hour, but to do an evaluation of all residential streets to see which areas are actually built that way and which areas aren't, and see where we can establish a lot of those safe zones where we need to make changes to the infrastructure.
Okay, so that would make changes, whether it's making the street feel more narrow or having traffic calming, so that people feel like it's a neighborhood,
right?
A narrow
And
neighborhood street.
the way Seattle has done it, I mean, they if you look at their signage, they did a blanket. Okay, all residential streets are 20 miles an hour. But if you look at the bottom of the sign, it says except where posted otherwise. And so on all the collectors and all the residential streets, you'll see a lot of the older speed limit signs that aren't established, the 20 and 25 mile per hour, which is what they're saying they're doing now. But they are slowly going through their network to be able to build it so that people are more comfortable going at those slower speeds.
Okay.
So as we go through implementation in the future years, those will be the things we will need to be considering. But the main thing is having this established now allows us to be able to require with new development to be able to build to these speed limits.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, anybody in the chat window? I've got more questions. Hey, I'm going to go for another one. Figure 18, Priority Bicycle Network. It's on page 37. Just back again, repeating a comment, and then I want to flesh it out a little bit better. We've talked before about the Issaquah Falls City Road being a priority corridor, and I know that you tried to work with this, but the reason I bring it back up is that in the policies it says that priority corridors will be or shall be reduced to a much lower level, the lower LTS. And for that road at 40 miles an hour with no space around it for expanding for facilities, it would be extremely expensive to make that. So to have a shall that priority corridors need to be an LTS 2 or lower, or whatever it is, I can't remember, would put a financial burden on the city. Just wondered how we can fix that up.
Which corridor were you speaking to?
The Issaquah Falls City Road, which is the big red and yellow line in the middle of figure 18.
Right.
So what I'm using that as an example. We talked about it before, where we have a policy that says that we shall reduce the LTS, but if we're identifying corridors where that would be extremely expensive and there are alternatives, then why are we sticking with trying to make that an LTS?
What do you mean there are alternatives?
Well, there's the Issaquah Highlands Road, and then there's also the one that goes up into Inverness, which is not on this map. It's on
I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. So how else do you get up that hill? And then just to learn a little bit more about when you do have a policy that says a shall and you identify a corridor, what kind of force of implementation does that really create when you say that this is your policy? Is it just when the road is being rebuilt, then you implement those? Who makes that decision when that investment comes in?
We would, us, the tab. I mean, one of the big elements of implementation for the master plan is actually to spend time taking a closer look at a lot of these projects. I mean, one of the major purposes of this whole process was to consolidate all the projects. But the consolidation of all the projects and all the other planning documents didn't include us going into detail on each of these projects, which is what we want to start with implementation, is to take a look at all these to see where does this make sense? Because some of these don't necessarily make sense. We're wanting to establish this policy which makes sense to a network that was established before any of us started with the city of Issaquah. A lot of this is based off the priority bike network that was established in the walk and roll plan that was adapted 5 years ago. Some of that needs to be revised because you're right. Some of these is going to be very difficult to implement an LTS 4 on Issaquah Falls City Road, particularly because a lot of those sections are newer, and so it's going to be harder to go back and rebuild.
Great. Looks like Cynthia has a comment on this, and maybe she can help us out here. Cynthia, go ahead. Unmute.
Well, I just can't help myself. I'm trying to listen to the concept that you're bringing up, and I'm having trouble separating that from just the content of that specific. As Stephen said, is you made the comment that there's an alternative, and I just wanted to echo that. There already are alternatives, and it is funny they're not on there. There's the what's the name of it? I always call it the Krispy Kreme Hill. And yeah, so I just wanted to echo that, but I think that doesn't get at the overall point, which I'm still just kind of struggling a little bit with, which is what are we saying by including this map? I think you're saying that we wouldn't actually go through and do this before we had a chance to revisit it, but what are we saying?
You're saying with the LTS levels? Is that what you're talking about, Cynthia?
Well, yes. So she's making a comment that says, that shouldn't be that color. And your response to that was, well, it's okay. Well, when we go through implementation, we'll make sure everything makes sense. So just back up and tell me are we just agreeing in concept that there's, so I'm just trying to figure out, it's just a constant struggle between a plan being a larger context framing, so forth, and the implementation happens later. But it's also important to understand what decisions are sort of being agreed to at that point. So I think that these figures promote discussion and help us vet things. But I always think it's important to then go back up and say, well, if it's wrong because of this reason, then what part of that is wrong? Is there something in the policy that's wrong, or did we just evaluate that one incorrectly for this figure? I don't know if that question makes sense.
It does. It does. So, I mean, the whole idea behind the LTS is to help us determine the type of facilities we want in those areas, not necessarily what the actual level of stress is once that infrastructure is there. Because one of the main points that was made at the last board meeting was topography wasn't necessarily taken into account with the level of stress, and so that's very important to consider. But what the level of stress policy is doing is actually helping us define the type of facilities we would want to put there. Not necessarily that is what we're going to be moving forward on. That's going to be part of the implementation process as we're going through this and vetting a lot of these projects in the implementation process to make sure it makes sense. Because there's still, I mean, like I said before, the bike priority network doesn't necessarily make sense today because it was adopted, 4, 5, 6 years ago now. So does that help answer your question a little bit better now?
I think so. Thanks.
Okay.
And it answers my question a little bit too. I think I was just trying to wonder what harm is it to leave in what is a acknowledged outdated map, and maybe what Cynthia said is does it have to be there for this to fly since we know it's outdated? Sujata has a question, and maybe she can help us with this.
Yeah, this is Sujata Goyal, and actually that was going to be my comment was, reorganizing this section where maybe we have a clearer matrix at the front that sort of lists all the policies in a more clear way, and then and then we have figures that sort of support those policies. If we know that this 2015 map is either outdated or non-achievable, or if we know that there's parallel or adjacent streets that actually provide the connectivity at the level of stress that we want, then it feels like it doesn't make sense. I personally don't think it makes sense to include an outdated map as sort of guiding set of values. It would make more sense to just say we are going to work on updating our walk and roll plan so it reflects these values. We can implement them accordingly, or some, you know what I mean? So we're going to update our walk and roll plan to reflect the values of our mobility master plan and update a map that sort of achieves these levels of stress in these, corridors, or something to that.
Got it.
Thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
because
you.
the policy makes sense, the map does not.
Okay, and Tom gets a turn on contributing to this too. Go ahead, Tom.
make sure I'm off mute. My comment was, could there be a statement to the effect of the age of the map, and that either we update the map or just note that it will be updated in a sequential year or something to the effect, so that we state something that we know that the map is out of date, but we're using it for a reference point.
A big banner across it that says old map. Looks like we might have exhausted this topic. Stephen, you got some good stuff to work with there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And Cynthia, I'm going to let you say that on the mic. Go ahead.
This is Cynthia Crass. Maps are good. I hate deleting them, but I like Tom's idea.
We can work with that.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you. Okay, looking for new comments. I'm always ready with an inspiration if you're not ready. This is just a little one. This is a little housekeeping one, Stephen. Easy peasy. Figure 20, which is in the concurrency section. Figure 20 is on page 41 of the plan, 75 of the packet. And down in the footnotes, it says LOSE, but it's in the policy. I think it's in this document, but it's in the other concurrency documents. It's E or F, as long as the average is D throughout the city. So to leave the F off here, I thought was a significant omission on this figure 20, levels of service for concurrency. And these are just the 6 intersections that are on the outside of the city that were, I wouldn't have known this if I weren't sitting on city council and we decided to say, oh, go ahead, E or F. We can't control how many people are coming through that intersection. It's on the edge of our town. It's something that's so out of control. How can we take on the burden of maintaining it? So we said E or F. Anyway, just a housekeeping on that one, I think.
We'll take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I got one more from my community. I talked with a few people in my neighborhood, and it just there's a section or a policy 7.1 about supporting pilot programs or neighborhood transits, and it's not a change at all. It's just to say, hey, keep that language in there, because as we go forward, especially post-COVID, looking at budgets of our transit systems, and also just the individual desires and needs of our neighborhoods, really wanted to keep that language in there. And Issaquah Highlands is already going forward with trying to advance a pilot program, and I hope that other neighborhoods will get that opportunity too. So kudos and thank you on that. We do have Sujata with a question.
Hi, this is Sujata Goyal. I guess one of the questions I was wondering about in the policies, and I'm not certain which one it would fit in, but if we're using our transportation policies and we're tying them to these other planning efforts, and now sort of in light of COVID and seeing how more people are working from home and certain organizations are like permanently moving people to work from home, I'm wondering with some of these other commissions, as they're coming forward, is there a way where we can, in one of our transportation policies, sort of just state this notion where we'd like to see, especially for the people where the trips don't, for those 33% of trips that don't originate in our city, they're basically just pass through. Is there something we can sort of do in our policies that talks about this notion of encouraging businesses in the area to, institute flex work schedules or work from home or, utilization of technology? Like now that we're all sort of stuck in this grand experiment and we're all, meandering through it up to and including the Issaquah School District just today, sort of sort of describe what they're going to be doing with our students. Like, is there a way that, so we're seeing this great influence, is there a way we can reflect that in an actual policy of saying, the Transportation Advisory Committee would really like to encourage a policy that states, try to work from home or whatever it may be. And we know that's not reasonable for all types of job types, but in the cases where there are, do we just want to sort of plant our flag in that case?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the edits that I forgot to mention that we are working on is that language around commute trip reduction, transportation demand management, to make sure that's a little more prominent. We don't want to go into too much detail on that because some of that has to be implemented as part of permit review process, and so just other policies will have to get updated to reflect what we're trying to achieve. So yes, I think that's an important point to highlight, though.
I don't see any other questions at this time.
See a comment from Cynthia.
Oh, comment. Oh, good. Yeah, Cynthia comment, and then when it looks like it's clear, Stephen, you can move on to the next sections of the document.
Just echoing, this is Cynthia Cross, echoing what Sujata had to say, and I was glad to hear you talk about commute trip reduction. When I was at the City of Sammamish, we did our comprehensive plan. We did we made a policy that the city would impose upon itself the CTR. I think is it still 100 employees? Could there be? I don't know. Maybe this just doesn't belong at this level, but I do think you could incent CTR to exceed the requirements or to comply, even if not required. Just a thought, because that was what I was thinking of, the commute trip reduction program when I was listening to Sujata, and it occurred to me that it could be, you could use the same program, but incent those not required to comply.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, thought. I'm not quite sure where it belongs. We're just at all these different levels, and it's so easy to dive right into the details. Just a thought.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we are playing with that language a little bit to kind of look at, especially with how COVID-19 has impacted everything, the whole conversation around telecommuting and incentivizing it. I mean, we didn't even need to incentivize it. Most people moved to telecommuting, so it's hard to say, okay, well, let's increase it by 10% more when everybody's already doing it. So we're trying to play with that language a little bit as a lot of the workforce goes back into flex schedules, which seems to be the trend for most large industries. To figure out how we can support some of that and work with, Metro and Sound Transit to make sure no connections are lost in everything. Anything else before I move on to implementation? That's the last part that I'm going to go into. So for implementation, we really are just going to be adding more detail to what's going to be happening next. We talked about what we're moving forward on for the remainder of 2020, which is more policy updates, but also making sure that our staff gets rebuilt because we've lost quite a bit of staff over the last year, and our transportation team is fairly limited to be able to do work through implementation. So once we have a full team, we'll be able to work a little bit more and build out more on the implementation for the master plan. In 2021, some of the updates that I talked about, we really had to take another look at the financial outlook for the city, but also for transportation to figure out how we can fund and build out some of this implementation, but also make more policy updates. Our ADA transition plan is needing an update and incorporation as part of this. Our implementation for our crossing guidelines needs to be updated, as well as the traffic calming policy. Things that we've talked about, but we never really fully updated yet. Things that needed to come after the master plan gets adopted. We're also going to be looking at how to incorporate the master plan into our capital improvement plan, which is part of that whole project review process, and going a little more detail on the projects, making sure they're relevant, but also making sure we incorporate the project selection criteria into the CIP, so that it's not just going based off what we've always done. We're now selecting projects for our CIP using the guiding principles and that selection criteria.
Can you pause a moment, Stephen? I have
Yeah.
a question from Cynthia and one from me after her.
Sorry, I couldn't type fast enough before you moved on. There was just one, we were going through details and it's not really much of a discussion, but on page 48, the LTS diagram has an error. It should say all ages on that first one. It's page 48 of the packet. And I didn't see a little sticky. I didn't know if you saw it already. It doesn't look like the one on page 68. It repeats LTS 1 and 2. It doesn't have the all ages language.
Okay, I'll make sure that gets updated. Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't type fast enough before you got into the next topic.
And I had a comment too. See if there's anybody else in the queue. Nobody, but go ahead and put question or comment in the queue. The question I had, and I think this is an implementation, but now I can't remember where it is. We were talking about implementing the Vision Zero and a proactive safety program. It said something like, we'll have a program by 2040. And I thought, why does it take 20 years to create a program? And I'm trying to find out where that was.
I think
it now, but it didn't say where it was.
Yeah, the language, I missed that, but the language should have said that we were trying to achieve the Vision Zero by 2040, not create a program by then. That it shouldn't take 20 years to create the program.
Maybe you could follow up on that for me and make sure
Yes, I will.
it's the right thing. Thank you so much. Anybody else in the, Sujata is next.
Yeah, this is Sujata. One of the questions, Stephen, just a clarifying question was, did you say one of the council members in this section of implementation, did one of the council members request us sort of growing the options of revenue opportunities? As far as
No, they were wanting us to expand more on the funding, specifically to say what our funding options are, how much revenue would be generated by each funding option, but also how much of the project list could be covered with each funding option. So just giving more detail of what these funding options mean in terms of the world of implementing the transportation projects. That's what they were asking for.
That answer your question? Okay, Sujata? Yeah, and I wondered why the city council didn't say something about this $200 million assumption that's in there. I wonder if that's necessary, considering revenues are so in flux. I will leave that to you. Okay, so what other sections do we have, Stephen?
That was the last part that I was going to go over with you for this, and then just open the floor for general questions, comments.
How should we look at the project evaluation criteria? Would be something that we all worked on, and you would have reviewed to see if it was still in keeping. I think that has stayed fairly unchanged in the more recent meetings that we've had. We've dialed that in.
Yeah, I think the biggest change we're making is to the I think it's section or criteria 4.1 or 4.2, looking instead of looking at LID, but looking more specifically at or landscaping, looking at what's impacting critical areas. So just changing the language and the evaluation around that instead of stormwater or LID, which is already required as part of our permitting process.
Opening up the floor. Someone have a comment about the stuff we've talked about, the prioritization criteria? Stephen, can you give us a little more information now that we see this project list? And you talked about the 27 or 20, whatever, are at the top. Can you kind of rerun through that a little bit for us about how you guys added projects, just for the record, and help make sure we all understand that?
Sure. I'll start from the beginning. Going back from the guiding principles, we used those to formulate project selection criteria. So things we've kind of reviewed multiple times of how do we want to evaluate each of the guiding principles as part of selecting our projects, developing the projects, but also prioritizing them. And so with the project evaluation criteria, we used the rankings and ranked all of the projects. I think it was a total of about 140 projects. 100 were pre-existing prior to us starting this process, and then we added about 40 more using the sidewalk and bike facility gap analysis that we did. And we identified, what that tells us is 27 projects from that list meet what we're trying to do with each of the guiding principles. It's not to say that the highest ranking one is going to be our number one priority. It's just to say we have now 27 high priority projects that we are trying to move forward on at any point where we find the opportunity to be able to try to implement them. Not to say that number one is going to be implemented before number 27. I'll pause there before I talk a little bit more. Any questions? Sujata, you have a comment?
Sorry, I'm being a real blabbermouth this meeting, but I do have a question and a comment actually on these prioritized projects. So when I look at the values that we sort of espouse about this plan or what we want to see in transportation in the city of Issaquah, and then, you know, we start diving into detail and policies and this and that, the one thing that I have to say is really striking to me is that when I look at the actual prioritized projects, and the ones that got the highest score, so it doesn't necessarily mean they're the first ones we're going to do, like Stephen said, but the ones that got the highest score, which was really interesting to me. So in a way, what we were valuing and how we ranked our projects, they actually, like whatever shift we sent everything through, in my mind, it actually worked. Because when you look at the prioritized list of projects, you're really seeing this notion of valuing non-motorized mobility, and you're looking at this notion of valuing the connectivity and complete streets and focused on the central corridor. You're looking at these values of safety. So it really, I was kind of excited when I saw this list and then the points that it achieved, because through this whole thing that we did, ultimately our values, I feel like the project list that is sort of the output is actually copacetic with what the values were when we started the process. So yay. So I'm feeling that way, and I don't know if everybody else, like, I mean, you know, because in public comment, there was a comment around reduction of congestion. And so I feel like as a transportation advisory board, we really thought a solution to congestion and climate and health was, you know, starting to prioritize mobility, non-motorized mobility, different ways of getting around. Like, we were really, I think as a body, we wound up focusing more on some of these other values as a way to get us to a reduction in congestion, and our list is reflecting that vision. And so I'm super excited about it, but I just wanted to take a pause and take a moment to, you know, it struck me as really great, but as a committee, do we want to take a pause and take a moment and say, you know, this, we're putting our stamp of approval on this, and as a committee, are we like, yes, or are we like, oh God, that's not where we meant to go? So I wouldn't mind, you know, if we had a moment, if we could get some feedback on that from the committee, because to me, this feels like the rubber hitting the road, and or the sneakers or whatever. So I just want to make sure that this was actually what people intended for the output.
I like that. There are a couple times this evening that I'd like to kind of hear from everybody. Some of you are quiet, but I appreciate all the things you've said, Sujata. And maybe, you know, this is a significant, as you said, output of all of the other things. So let's just kind of go around. Let me just call on names like I did and see if you kind of agree, don't agree. Do you think that the outputs is as manifest in the list? It's where you thought we were going. And just very briefly, really briefly, Tom, why don't you go first?
have to figure out. I've got 3 screens. I'm trying to figure out where my mouse is so I can unmute myself. My first comment was like, can I defer? But I may play dumb here and ask you a little bit more specifically as far as our comment on the prioritized projects or how they were arrived at. I wasn't sure exactly what the question is as far as the area that we're talking about right now. I think the prioritized projects. So I'm not sure exactly what the question is that I'm supposed to.
I think it's just kind of getting to, do you think that the outputs of the accumulation of policies to criteria to project list,
Yeah,
was getting you where you thought you were going?
So what I was looking for was kind of a balance between not everything being a roadway project, but the balance between the first one starts off with the bike and the shared use path. As far as the balance between the types of projects, and I know that I understand that if they have a certain amount of money, you might do some projects that might be less expensive, so you can get several projects done as opposed to banking on the most expensive, largest project at any one time, not doing the others, to get enough funds to do that one, trying to balance out between the 2 of them. So I was looking at both the size of projects and the balancing between the street, the trail improvements projects, and I thought it was, a quick read through that it was a fairly balanced list of projects.
Anybody else ready? Raise your hand. I'll call on you. Emma's ready.
I think that I really like where this is all going. I really like that we prioritize the walking and the bikes first. And maybe if we are getting that feedback that it doesn't specifically use the terminology as like clearing up congestion, we could just incorporate that into those areas of policy. So maybe under like where we have the bike diagrams, you could say, in order to clear up congestion, like this is why we are prioritizing it, maybe make it a little bit more apparent. But I really like where we're going. I think it's a good product.
That's a good point, Emma. It could just be in the way those projects are characterized, that they're not bringing forward how they are helping with congestion too. And in many cases they do. Who else is ready? Who else is ready to say?
I can go. This is Marisol Fisher. And I want to agree with Sujata and what she said. I mean, at the beginning, when starting this project in this advisory board, I felt like, we're going to come together and there's going to be so much at once. And it has. And at the same time, I have been learning so much on how things work. And I do think, as Emma was saying, that, perhaps the wording that we have been using is not what, it won't say, I don't want to say decongestant because that's not what I mean, but you know what I mean. But yes, like prioritizing those 2. I mean, we are actually saying these are changes that needs to be done, and it might not be what, people are expecting to hear, or might not be the words, but it is taking us to where people will be thinking about using other type of transportation instead of what we're using right now. Because making more roads and making them wider won't help decongest in the long term. Because in the long term, if we keep doing that, I mean, where are we gonna go? So yeah, I really think that the priorities and putting the things together, it was a good call. I'm really proud of all the work that everybody has been doing in this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisol. And I think I have Kobe up next. Are you ready, Kobe?
Yeah, this is a question. Yeah, sorry, this is Kobe. I have a question kind of related to Tom's comment, and I'm not quite sure exactly how to word this. But I feel like a lot of these types of project rubrics or criteria, I guess is a better way to say it, always prioritize the projects that are the most expensive because they tend to have the biggest impact. And I'm not super knowledgeable on the individual infrastructure projects, so I'm not quite sure if this is the case. But I was just wondering if our project list, the items with the highest priority are mixed with both high cost and low cost items.
Yes, they are. Yeah, we tried not taking the financial aspect into too much of the project selection criteria just because we want to use them with prioritization. The cost will come into effect as we are implementing the top 27 projects and determine the type of opportunities we want to take. It doesn't mean that we can't elevate lower projects that aren't necessarily that top 27 when a specific grant comes out, let's say, and then project number 100 actually rises to the top because of that type of opportunity. But is to say that we are actively trying to pursue those 27 top projects as part of either our CIP or as part of short-term projects or lower cost projects as part of a program that the city might have. So yes, I think it's a good mixture of both high projects that are going to have a higher cost and projects that are a little bit lower.
Thank you.
That's a good comment on grants, actually, because sometimes the TIB or other might have grants that come out for certain things, and something that might be lower down the tier might be, oh, this is a perfect project for that type of grant. And you bring it up to apply for the grants if you get it, and then you go ahead and can build it.
Excellent. Good comments by both of you. Kobe, did you want to say anything about your impressions?
Good comment, Kobe.
Get a chance to read the project list? You obviously seems like you did, and did you think they reflected the direction we thought we were going?
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. We've gone through the project criteria quite a bit, and it looks like it's been thorough enough to make sure that we evaluate projects from a ton of different sources and are able to accurately rank them, I guess. So yeah, looks good to me.
Maddie, Maddie and Cynthia. You need to unmute. There you go. Thanks.
Oh, this is Maddie. I was also really pleased with how we prioritized the projects, and I also really wanted to echo what Emma was saying earlier about how we are characterizing each of our projects and making sure that we use or we get our point across on why we prioritize the projects the way we have, and using words like congestion that mean a lot to the people who will be reading our paper, and so they understand that the projects that we have prioritized are trying to address those problems that they do have and their concerns.
Excellent, Maddie. Thank you very much. Cynthia, do you want to weigh in this way?
Sorry, I was doing a split screen thing and I got really lost. But it is handy to have a split screen. I do want to say that I don't exactly know what we should say about congestion. I think Emma's right. There are probably some ways we can work in reduce congestion is going to be an outcome of some of the activities, but we have to be kind of I guess, address the elephant in the room a little bit. A lot of people, when they first think about Issaquah, the first thing they think of is sitting in traffic on Front Street, and their impulse is to say, I want to reduce congestion. But every one of us has been through this, and council has also been through this, and that has clearly not been our goal, is reducing what people think of as congestion, which is cars. And so, and as I think, as Marisol pointed out, like, we can't just widen all roads. That's what, that's a race to the bottom. And so I guess I'm a little kind of just asking the question. I guess one question is, does everybody agree with my characterization of how we treated the non-goal of the narrow, to me, the narrow and short term? Sort of leave it where we just don't really take that straight on because it's just too difficult to communicate to the broad public, because you really got to dive deep before you understand why that goal isn't really achievable and why mobility is the goal, not reduction of congestion. So there's part of me that says, let's just go out on a limb and say what it is. And part of me says, you know what, everyone who spends time with this comes to the same conclusion. Let's not sweat it too much. But I do think that, I just was looking again through the project criteria, and yeah, for sure. I think Sujata's point is a good one, and I think it is where the tennis shoes meet the road. And I think, yay us.
Did I see Emma come off mute? There you go, girl.
Yeah, this is Emma. Responding to Cynthia's point, I totally understand, like, absolutely our goal should be mobility, as people who have gone through that research that widening roads won't help with congestion. But I also know that, like, if I talk to my mom about this stuff, or like if I bring it up in our like neighborhood by like a bonfire however long ago before quarantine, they're like, oh, you got to widen the roads. Oh, you're not widening the roads. You got to make more. Go behind the school, and they have all these paths designed like in their heads of like, oh, we could just make a road right here and then like everything would be solved. And so definitely like seeing the research, we know that that's not the solution, but to the vast majority of people, I think we should make it apparent that this is the best path that we can take given this situation. And so maybe just incorporating those trigger words like congestion and like this will help with congestion, will help with like the general public's feedback.
Looking for anybody else who would like to contribute. This has been a really awesome conversation and a great segue. Just what I was kind of looking for. I was trying to think of how to capture the feeling of the board, and with Sujata's comments that kind of fed right into this, which has been very nice. I'm not seeing Kobe. Do you have another question? Would you like to come up, Kobe? Is that an old one? That's an old one.
Yeah, that's an old one. I do have a comment to make though.
Please do.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, kind of in agreement with what Cynthia and Emma said. Everyone always talks about the time before Issaquah had like all this traffic, but I've moved here 7 or 8 years ago, so all I know is the traffic that is now, and it doesn't seem like a problem that is ever going to go away. We're always going to have more traffic than we had, all a long time ago. I think like a large part of our job is not just finding and implementing projects that help with that congestion without just making more roads or making roads wider, is also educating, kind of helping the community understand that this is something that won't just be helped by increasing the size of roads or adding new roads.
Thank you, Kobe. I don't see anybody else in the chat. There's another thing that this conversation has brought up is taking us back to our guiding principles, one of them being improve mobility. And it says improve mobility using all travel options, which would include the car. So we're not forgetting them. And I think that's the point that we're trying to say. And then the other is to prepare for growth, which means that we need, and we talk about multimodal in that guiding principle, saying that we need to expand the options for people so that we can get more people through more places, but it's still not saying we're not serving the car. So the opportunities that may not have been identified yet to show where this will also, or contribute to making it safer to drive. That's another thing, making it safer to drive through Issaquah is an important consideration for me. Marisol, you have a comment?
Yeah, this is Marisol. And yeah, my comment was along what Kobe was just saying. And just thinking about, sorry. Yes, that, driving is all we know, especially in this area because of the distances and all that. And this is something that we have to learn. And it might not be something that is, directly correlated with the work we are doing. This is a bigger conversation of how the city of how Issaquah is educating or sharing what the options are to travel within Issaquah. What are we teaching our young generation? That I think Hobie or Maddie, I don't remember who brought it at the beginning of our first meetings, where everybody's looking forward just to drive when they turn 16. Well, what are the other options? What else can they do if they turn 16 and they can start driving? What else can you? How else can you move from the highlands to downtown Issaquah other than driving? I mean, those are things that, as I said, it might not be something that has to come up from this board, and it might be a bigger conversation, and it might be a cross path with another, something else that the city is already doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisol. So again, this does seem to tee up a nice segue to the next item on the agenda. If Stephen, you think you've gotten what you wanted on the item of the draft plan, list of revised changes, and having a discussion with us, do you think we've completed that section okay?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so then let's move on to the review MMP letter of support, which is an action item, meaning that we'll have a vote. I'm working with Stephen. We have a draft letter that perhaps Stephen can bring up on the screen. And can you bring it up as a Word doc, Stephen, so that you can edit it in place? That'd be great. I think we can get this all the way to the finish line by reading through it ourselves on the screen, and it was in your packet. The new one was in the packet, right? Yeah, it was. It was. And the important thing is that it starts, we, the members of the Transportation Advisory Board. This is why we needed you all here, because this letter represents the handoff of this draft plan. Some of the important words to me, and I'm just going to ask you to read it critically and wordsmith or say that something should be in there that's not in there. I think it's important to say that it's a draft plan. Okay, go ahead, Tom.
This is Tom. In the bullets, we talk about elevate the safety, increase access, recognize the importance of climate change. And I think it's one of the things in there is that it's not said is addressing the different transportation modes and their connections. It's kind of key of the mobility master plan in a way.
Thank you, Tom.
One of the bullets in there. And then I highlighted, it just sounds a little strange as far as advancing the draft mobility master plan through the rest of the public process involved in adoption. I kind of know what that means. Maybe it's semantics, but just the rest of the public process through adoption or through to adoption. It's a little nitpicky. It just read a little strange when I was reading that.
Yeah, that's down at the bottom. I can't see that part on the screen right now, Stephen. If you scroll up, that'd be great. Okay, so that last sentence.
Scroll up just a touch. Oh yeah, you've got it right there. Okay.
So what did you want there? Is that it? Did you already edit it? No, you didn't. What do you want there?
I think the MPV to the rest of the public process, maybe process through to adoption.
Okay.
As opposed to involved in adoption. because I think what we're trying to say is the public process is everything moving forward. The council meeting to me, as opposed to just a public process, which means to me like a public comment. But this is basically the whole public process as far as going to the council and voting and being implemented.
Yeah, I'm going to have you pause for a moment because I think Stephen's going to, he's going to go out and come back in. So that's when he comes back in and brings us back up on the screen, we will look at that closing comment. You can help him craft that, Tom. And then I'm not seeing anyone else in the chat. Okay, Sujata.
One more comment. The question is down in the last paragraph. There's a city's consultant fears and peers. There's a comma and then a period. It should probably just be a period.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, Sujata, are you on?
Hi, this is Sujata. So one of the things I was wondering about is in that I think it's the second paragraph where it says in accordance with, county code, blah, blah, or city code, blah, blah, blah. So the second sentence, instead of saying throughout the MMP development process, the board priorities have been clear, could we say something more? Because the whole idea is like, this is the plan, but the plan is here to achieve a vision. So could we change that language to be more along the ideas of, as a board, we feel robust implementation of this plan will lead to, or will, elevate safety. So basically, this is a plan, but we as a board don't see it just to Cynthia's point of a plan that gets put on a shelf, but that we're really also, as we're transmitting this plan, we're encouraging the council to really acknowledge that we want to see implementation of it. And so, elevate, and through implementation, we would elevate safety as the highest priority for our system. I think the increased access to services with people with higher needs is also important. But the other one I was wondering about is, and maybe it's in bullet point 1, where we say elevate safety and connectivity, because I feel like one of our big priorities we talk about, and even in our ranking prioritization, if it connects stuff to stuff, it's a higher priority. And so I don't see connectivity there. So I feel like that was one of our big guiding principles. So maybe that elevate safety and connectivity or something in the first bullet point.
Yeah, that brings up a question. May I ask if there are there's the guiding principles, which are supposed to be the touchstone for everything. Is it suitable to the guiding principles? And then there are these things, like separate things. And I'm not disagreeing that these things aren't important, but they were never really codified like the guiding principles were.
Yeah, so I was actually basically just trying to shoehorn our guiding principles.
Yeah, put a guiding principle in here.
So maybe instead of these bullet points, if we could just put, robust implementation of this plan will lead to this outcome of, a safer, interconnected, multimodal, mom and apple pie, all those things, improve climate, blah, blah, blah. So it feels like that.
Okay. What if we left these 3, and I can't remember, Stephen's going to bring it up because I can't remember which one Tom added. I mean, there might be room here for leaving these 3 bullet points and then adding the guiding principles as bullet points, just the bolded keywords, so that the guiding principles get into this document. That's something, because we name them, but really they're so important that it might be worth saying, where we say we incorporated these priorities into the guiding principles, those bullet points, and employ these principles too. Maybe that helps tell the whole story. It's like a mini executive summary.
Yeah, but I feel like those guiding principles were so fundamental, and especially when you see the product, the list, they're really fundamental, and I just feel like they should be on the letter.
So in a way, that sentence could read something like the board has taken, I'm just making this up as I go along, you kept at the forefront the guiding principles that, whether you list them there or saying the guiding principles that have prioritized or have, I'm trying to put
Yeah,
something here. Something that
you,
lists the bullets.
Can Stephen bring up the letter again? Thank you. Welcome back, Stephen. Still can't hear you. Ah, there he is. We're going to finish this, and you guys, this is a tool and implement this letter. And I think the most important thing that we've learned in this meeting, as we've talked to one another, is the level of confidence that we have in the draft plan, that it's on a good path. And so I think we don't need to be. They will have a draft plan, but I think that we want this letter to include those things that we think are top of mind. So we can just kind of get to the point. We can get it done. There we go. So I think the screen crashed when you were working on the fourth bullet that said multiple modes and address. Maybe Sujata, maybe that's where it can say multiple modes and increases connectivity. How about that, Tom?
Yeah, I think the addressing the different transportation modes and their connections or connectivity.
And you know what? It has to be a verb at the beginning of that to say increase modes and some connectivity or something. And then get rid of the second increase. Okay. Close, getting close. And then Tom saw a typo in the last paragraph after fair and peers. There's an unnecessary comma. And then Sujata, that statement before the bullet points where it says throughout the development process, the board priorities have been clear. I liked your suggestion to say something like, we feel this plan will, something like that. Sujata, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, what I was saying is we feel that, something along the lines of, robust implementation of this plan will.
Yeah. Okay.
So something, so we're saying we're transmitting the plan, but that we have all confidence in the council that they will figure out how to implement this too.
Okay, so take that sentence right there. You're going to replace in the second paragraph the phrase that says throughout the MMP development process, the board priorities have been clear. Mm-hmm. That's going to be replaced with, we feel the robust implementation of this plan will result in, and will elevate safety, will increase access, will recognize, and will increase, right? So move that up. Yep. And then get rid of
Can I jump in since my comments on this? I hate using we feel. I would say the board strongly recommends. No, at the first part of that sentence. I hate, sorry, I don't mean to say I hate. I think we feel is too soft. The board strongly recommends.
Then at the end of the sentence, instead of will, it can say in order to. Great. Okay. So then.
And then the other sentence is throughout the MMP process.
Yeah,
all the way
still
to that part
we can remove that, right? There you go. Boom. You guys are awesome.
I have a comment about that one too. This is Cynthia. So I think right there the board the board was formed, and the comment that I made to council, I think it's worth reiterating here. The board is diverse. And you could even say like age, professional background, demographics, whatever you want. But we were remarkably unified in the priorities and guiding principles. And just thinking about the fact that they, Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
I have a comment. Instead of saying the board is diverse but unified, can we say and?
And
Yeah, good idea.
Thank you.
I love this. You know, I do this for a living, but this is more fun than when I do it by myself. I love this. Sweet. Any others? I think we're getting close here. Okay, one more call.
Yeah, you have the board, and the pub should be a capital B. You have the board is diverse, and then you have the board strongly recommends. Just that we have it there. Maybe the board is diverse and unified in their guiding principles. We strongly recommend robust implementation in order to blah, blah, blah.
Good, good. One thing when we approve such documents as this, Stephen, clarify for me, there may be a grammatical correction still after the board has approved, as long as the substance of the letter does not change. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll work with Nina and Cynthia to make sure this is getting the message from tonight's discussion.
Okay, so in that case, since this is an action, and I need to go back to my notes and see how I do this. We're going to do another vote, kind of like the vote we did for the minutes. I think I need a motion because this is an action. Can anybody move to finalize this letter and send it to the administration and the city council?
Can we say adopt? This finalizes an action.
Okay, yeah, okay, right, okay. Why don't you make that motion?
So moved.
And who was it? I'm sorry, it was Emma who seconded?
Sure.
Okay. Is that adequate for a motion, Stephen? Okay. I'll call your name. Just going the way it is on my screen because it's easier for me to keep track. And so then unmute yourself. If you're muted, say your name and say aye or nay. Tom?
Tom, aye.
Sujata?
Sujata, aye.
Cynthia?
Cynthia, aye.
Emma?
Emma, aye.
Kobe?
Kobe, aye.
Maddie?
Maddie, aye.
Marisol?
Marisol, aye.
And you all moved, and so I hope I got you all. The screen moved around. And Nina, aye. And put me down as an aye for that minutes earlier, too. Okay, so that's approved unanimously to adopt this letter to the administration and the council as edited tonight. Yes, big round of applause for everybody. We are at the end of our time, but the agenda still has on it just a couple little items. There's staff report, chair report, and youth report. Stephen, is there a staff report?
Yes, really quick. We are in the process to hire a new transportation manager. Kurt retired last week. So our Bob York, our engineering manager for our stormwater and environmental group, is currently in charge. We are hoping applications were due recently, so we're hoping to do interviews very soon. And then later this year, potentially early next year, we'll be looking to get our new public works director. And then the other update I have is on the streetery. So that, as some of you remember, that is a recommendation from the Recovery Task Force. It is now going into its 5th weekend this coming weekend, so it's going strong. It's receiving a lot of great feedback from the community and the businesses. Some of the businesses are actually reporting record sales, even compared to pre-COVID. So it's going fairly successful for them. So, we're working with retailers to expand some of their exposures because people are still wondering who's still open, and try to get them involved in some of this a little bit more so we can benefit more of the businesses. Citywide, businesses are being allowed to expand their outdoor seating into private parking lots for those who aren't down on Front Street. So we're trying to allow more of these businesses to be able to do this citywide. The The only thing that's changed more recently is that the street area expanded to include Sundays as well. So it's not just Fridays, Saturdays, so it's also Sundays. And right now it's going to go until the end of September. So there's still plenty of time to go and enjoy it if you haven't been down there yet. That's all I got.
That's an excellent report, Stephen. Thank you. And what he didn't say was that he's like holding us up all this year on his own with the staffing needs, and it's an opportunity right now for all of us to put our hands up and say thank you to Stephen for his
Thanks,
hard
Steve.
work this year. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that, but a lot of how the master plan was put together was due to a lot of your hard work going into these meetings and extra readings, and so I definitely appreciate all your time as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Stephen. The chair, I think I reported enough tonight. Tonight was kind of my report. And I wonder if there's a youth report. There very well could be. No? Okay. And then the next thing would be when is our next meeting? Because this is a committee that keeps working. This isn't like we're done. So, Stephen, how would you like to cap it off that way?
I think we're going to be looking at trying to do a October meeting will probably be our next meeting, just because of what we're doing for this month and next month. I think October will probably be the best time for us to meet again.
Yeah, there's the October 8th.
The public hearing is part of the comp plan process. Yeah, I think at that point, that we'll have enough feedback from everybody that we'll be able to touch base again and let you know if there's any changes or what changes might be happening with the master plan before it goes to City Council in November and December.
This is Tom. Would that be a good time to have it after that public hearing then? So mid-October, late October?
Yes, and I'll check in with everybody to see who's available and when.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll get that on the calendar as soon as we can, so we hear the date. That'd be great. Well, that's a couple months from now. I'm looking at all your faces for a long last year. It's a little, not a goodbye. It's just another little break as our plan goes off into the world and gets worked on. But again, thank you all for being here tonight and sticking through this. This has been a challenge, with the way that business with the city changed this year during COVID. And it's a big project besides. So thanks to everybody for all your hard work. Thanks again, Stephen.
Before we adjourn, I would like to say congratulations to all our youth members for going off to college soon. Because they're going off to college, they won't be able to join us anymore. But I wanted to take this opportunity to at least congratulate them and say thank you for all your hard work, because you've definitely been a great contribution as part of this board, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think it was Sujata who said earlier. Now, I can't remember who said it because it was at the first meeting. I mean, straight out of the gate, these guys have been a real asset to this group, and it's been a delight working with all of you.
I agree.
Thank you, Stephen.
That and perspective and sticking with it the whole time through everything that's gone on, at least most recently as well. So.
Crazy. Okay.
Thank you so much. I know I've definitely learned so much during this last year and a half with you guys, and it's been an experience. So thank you for teaching me, and I guess all of us. It's been fun.
Yeah, good luck in September.
Nina, you're muted.
Does Kobe or Maddie want to say something?
I think Emma summed it up very well. I want to thank all of you guys for all the great work you've done, and I know I've learned a lot. Transportation is a very complex issue, and there were a lot of times I felt very lost. But I'm really proud of the work that we've all done, and just thank you for being so awesome.
Maddie's nodding, but she's not saying anything.
Oh, well, I think, yeah, Kobe and Emma really said it all, but just like echoing what they said, just want to thank everyone for um, just like supporting us throughout this entire month and like year that we've been working together, and also for all your patience as we kind of learned the ropes with city council volunteering and like local government work. But yeah, we've definitely learned so much, and I'm excited to like take everything I've learned into college and the world. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's this, they're so humble. I mean, here they are saying that we gave things to them. Are you kidding? It's what you brought to us, really. I don't know what we gave you, nothing. You brought it all. So with that, and thank you, Stephen, for bringing that up. We'll send them off. We'll send off the draft plan, and we will adjourn the Transportation Advisory Board for August 6th at 8:08 p.m., not too far after the time. Thanks, everybody. Good night.